I'm going to talk to you about qualitative research review and the process there. Here's the slides. Hopefully you can see them. And the learning outcomes for today is to discuss the significant issues regarding conducting qualitative research, and those include ethics, combining methods, computer assistance, and scientific rigor. We'll also review the criteria for critiquing a qualitative research report. So what are the key issues you're going to look at? And then there's going to be some information about your own paper and how to do that, and then to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses. It says an in-class critiquing activity, but that's really online talking about. You're not going to obviously have any class time in this class. So, issues with conducting a qualitative research. There are certainly ethical issues like every research project, and there should be a review by an institutional review board, also called the IRB, and their job is to protect the human subjects to make sure that the information that is collected is not going to do any injury or harm to people, and that the process is done correctly. And because in qualitative research, there's often some really sensitive information that might be given. There might be a research study that looks at doctor-nurse relationships. Well, that could be a problem if nurses can be identified. I had been reading a research article about some nurses in Taiwan, and they actually said what floors of the hospital the nurses were on and what kind of services the doctors were on. And I wondered, after reading that, not everything was super flattering, but it wasn't real negative. Might that process affected the results, either what the nurses said or possibly what the doctors and the nurses' relationship might have been after. So those are things that the IRB considers. It's a bit difficult in what's called a naturalistic setting. For example, with an ER, someone might want to get the real feeling for an ER, but who do you have sign the consent form? It's hard. Everyone that walks in the door, family, patients, doctors, ER, like people that come into the ER, like a paramedic, police. So it's hard to figure that out, and that's what the IRB can help with. Who needs to sign? It's very important that the researcher have both trust and respect by the people that they're working with. Selection of participants is oftentimes a little bit different. Actually usually really different than quantitative, in that people are picked for a purpose. And you'll hear, and I know many of you wrote purposive sampling in your qualitative information on the posting. And that means they looked at specific groups of people and chose within those who would be the best. Because remember, the sample sizes tend to be very small with this, so you want to get people who can give you some really good information. When the researchers are in there, it's sometimes difficult to separate oneself. Say if a nurse is working in the ER as they're doing the research, when are they being a nurse and when are they being a researcher? And it can get really confusing. Other instruments and a bit of confusion is that the researcher is the instrument. They're collecting the data, so they really have to stop and think about themselves and how they might be influencing the data that's collected and how their ideas might be changing what's going on. And you'll hear people talk about bracketing ideas, and that you're supposed to kind of put them aside. In reality, you can't put your feelings aside, but you need to be aware of them and once again get that idea of, okay, this is what happens. It's very important, too, to clarify and validate findings. So the researcher doesn't go, okay, I made a decision, this is what's happening here, but goes back and says, hey, this is what I found, is this what you feel? And sometimes that can be a little uncomfortable, particularly if it's not a very happy topic. So that's one way to make sure that the researcher's information is accurate. They also might use this word triangulation. It means putting more things in to make sure that the information is accurate and correct. So they might have another researcher look at the data or collect the data with them. They might, review the transcripts if it's a transcripted study, and then have someone else do it blindly without looking at them and see a comparison. Did they get the same? Did they as the other person? And then maybe give that information back to the participants in that. They want to be crystal clear. I think the idea is that there aren't any hidden things, that everyone can see exactly what's going on. You hear people talk about metasynthesis. Oftentimes that term is used in looking at combining a variety of research projects to see what the results are, but it is used in a variety of ways. After data is collected, it is possible to use some computer programs to look at themes. They might just use Word and do highlighting of different topics. Like every time, let's look at a neonatal intensive care, and every time the mom says something about being afraid, they might highlight that in orange. Every time it talks about the nice nurses, how nice they were, how much support they got, maybe that in pink. And then be able to pull those parts out and take a look at, how many times did this happen? How many times did all the moms talk about this, or did some of the moms? And that information will be put into a graph, although a lot of times qualitative research does not include graphs. So programs can be helpful, and there are some programs you can look online like Ethnograph that is helpful. Another one, it used to be called Nudist, and now they have a better name for it. That was a little weird. But there are several that can help with that process. You'll hear people talk about scientific rigor, credibility, auditability, and fitness of the research. I'll talk about each of these separate, but credibility is talking about the truth of the findings. Does it really show what happened? Auditability, can you figure out what was going on? Were the methods correct? And does it fit? Does it all feel good in terms of it makes sense, and is that actually useful practice? In terms of credibility, you want to see the truth in the findings. Does it make sense? Was there enough information given that you feel like you're giving as the reader some accurate information? In ways that can be done is maybe give quotes, give it back to the research participants to see, if this is what they're feeling and they're sensing, like I mentioned before. And just giving a thorough description in the write-up too is also real helpful to improve credibility. Auditability, once again, need to have a lot of information about what happened, what were the steps. Sometimes it's just like, well, we talked to some people and then we got these themes out, and you're like, really, how did that happen? Was it transcribed? Were there notes taken? Was it a combination? Was it videoed? Was it large group discussion, individual? What was going on? That's really helpful. And so step-by-step logical method is really important. So ask yourself these questions as you're reading your article you're going to write your paper on, and think about including them and the answers. All right, fitness. Does it feel like it works? Are there enough details? Does it make sense? Does it flow? And is the information that was collected feeling like it can be used in practice? Is it just out there in la-la land, or is it something that people could use? And that's, see. As you do your own paper and as you review qualitative research, you want to think about a couple of things. For example, is it telling you the insiders, or sometimes you hear the word emic view, what it's like to be that parent in the NICU, what it's like to be the nurse? You kind of get a sense of the culture and the experience that's going on. And once again, by using quotes and themes, that's helpful. In publication, most journals want to limit the articles to about 15 pages. Believe it or not, that can be difficult. There's a lot of information, so oftentimes researchers from one data collection, one research project, will have several articles. One time they focus on one part of it, one time they might focus on another. And so that's a way to keep it limited. Because of all those quotes, it can make it kind of long. So I hope you've already reviewed Chapter 6, and I hope you take a look at it again. Also critique the study Living with Chronic Illness, and take a look at page 146 to 151 for a nice example on how to develop your own paper. There's criteria on the web and in the web campus. You want to take a look at those. I would look at the guidelines and information before you start, then about midway, and then after, so you don't start heading in the wrong direction. For the assignment, you want to pick one of the 5 articles, and those are on the web campus in the module. They'll have to be they need to be qualitative research. Then you review the assignment guidelines once again, read the article, develop an outline, and think about these questions that I'm asking, and we're talking about credibility and audibility and things like that. Make sure those are included. And then take a look at some other source books, definitely APA. That OWL Purdue website's really good. Write, then revise. You can get someone else to read your paper. That's helpful. If you can't, maybe read it out loud to yourself. That makes a big difference. You don't put in words that aren't there when you read it out loud, or at least not so much. Make sure you don't have repetition or unnecessary content. Make sure each paragraph you're like, oh, this paragraph is in here because it answers this part of this question or this part of the assignment. If you go a little beyond 8 pages, not a big deal as long as it's not rambling. That's okay with me. And make sure you find the due date, make sure you get it in there. For writing the paper, once again, make sure it's at a critical level, that you're really thinking about it, and use APA. Make sure you don't plagiarize. Follow those assignment guidelines and evaluation form on the web campus. Here's some APA style pages that could be helpful in terms of writing that paper, and good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing those papers and reading them. Let me know if you have questions. Bye now.